Okay, so I gathered your reading questions. Let me grab one so that I know what I asked you. And this week we started reading about Rome. And we read about Israel a little bit. We're going to talk about Rome first. I have your, well, let me ask, do I have everybody's ant and grasshopper 5 W's? There was some misunderstanding perhaps in the earlier group that came in when I gave you this assignment, and if you did not do it this way, it's all right. It just means I wasn't clear enough. The idea was that it would look like my example, so that you would just do that one moment. You know, like I did the moment when the tortoise was waking up, and I did the moment. But okay, I see the looks because the ladies who said I just couldn't stop writing kind of clued me into. They wrote more than I did. So far be it from me to stop someone from writing a story who wants to. That's never wrong. Go for it. If you feel like I just wanted to bring it all in and I will be very happy to read it, okay? No problems. But for those of you, because some people, this is their thing. They like creative writing, they like writing fiction, they like using their imaginations more, and if that's you, and this is sort of an outlet for you, go do it. But some people don't feel that way. Some people, it's just, they'd rather do a nonfiction essay. I would rather do that. I know. What? But I still cranked out those little paragraphs for you guys for examples. So towards the end, I will tell you, we're going to do something similar. I hope you didn't use up every single idea that you had with the ant and the grasshopper, because we're going to revisit them. Oh, yay! See, you get chapter 2 of the ant and the grasshopper, which we will talk about later. Let me grab my Rome book.
Well, like,
so Dorothy Mills, at the beginning of this, she mentioned a little bit about the character of the Romans being different than the character of the Greeks. And does anybody, before I look it up, Ethan, you want to fill out that idea?
The Greeks were more of like, if it's beautiful, if it's good, if it's pure, then we will do this thing. They were built off of religion and beauty, like even like what was it? Who went into battle and combed their hair like
Spartans.
Spartans,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. The Romans.
They combed their hair and then they went into battle.
Yeah, then they went into battle. Yeah.
Right.
The Romans were more practical people. If we can get it done, then
yes.
It's good.
Yes. There was a practicality about them. Yeah, Ella.
Would you say it's form versus function?
Ooh, that's very good. Greeks were concerned about not just the outside appearance, but form in the sense of, we talked a little bit about Plato, it's kind of weird, but this idea of the forms, the ideal realities behind things. But Romans were get her done sort of people. I want this road to work, I want this town to be efficient, and so it made different sorts of civilizations. She also talked about, why don't you pull out your maps? I gave you several maps, and one of them was just a map of Italy. Grab your just a map of Italy. Because we used up some of our time with me running to the car, but I have tons and tons to talk about, so let's take some time to do some math work today.
It's so much easier with my Aeneid grasshopper and my science project.
Good job.
Uh-huh.
I packed all my stuff on Tuesday.
No, yeah, I thought I packed all my stuff, but it's in the pile on my desk.
There. Yay. Okay. Does everybody have a map? If you don't know where your map is, it's okay. If you have your map, awesome. If you don't, I'm sure you have maps in your home. Can't imagine a homeschooling family with no maps. That would just be wrong. Like no pencils or paper. That would be wrong.
That's true.
I think that this map does not have a scale. I wish that you could see how close, how small this is. I think she says it's about 300 miles long, the peninsula of Italy. Like Illinois is a little over 300 miles long. Like this is Illinois. To put it in perspective, you know, we think, because we live in a huge country, and we think of countries as being huge things, but in Europe, countries are not huge things. And here's what I'd like you to mark on your map. First of all, be creative and make a line of mountains down the middle. You can just say, don't take the time to like sketch snowy peaks on the top or anything like that. Put some mountains down the middle and put some mountains up here. Not just because mountains are cool, but because it affected life in Italy and how Italy developed. So the mountains that you've done down the calf of the boot are the Apennines, which I will write Apennines.
It goes down to like the toe.
All the way down.
Yeah, it really does.
It goes down to the toe.
And then I think everybody can see that these are the Alps, with which you are probably familiar in some context with the idea of the Alps. I once got to drive through the Alps. I went after I graduated from high school. My high school was doing a trip to France, and I had taken a year of French. I had taken 4 years of Latin, but I had taken, well, I started the second year, and then I didn't, there was a new teacher, and I didn't like her, so I quit, which is terrible, but which is not something you should model yourself after. It was a mistake. But I did go on the trip with them, and we spent a few days in London, and went to Canterbury, and then we spent most of our time in France. But we were driving around France, and then we drove through the Alps. There's a tunnel, the Mont Blanc tunnel, and it's, I don't know, miles long, drilled through the Alps. It's crazy.
How many miles?
I don't know, 12 miles, I think.
Okay.
12-mile tunnel. I'm not sure. I'm just off the top of my
Still a
head. But,
million miles.
and then we had a meal in starts with a T. It's not important. A town up near in northern Italy, and then we went back into France. Anyway.
Town starts with a T.
It was more than town. Turin. Because I was thinking the shroud is the town with the shroud. Turin. And we had spaghetti. Anyway, it has nothing to do with the lesson. The point is that it was very mountainous. And here's the point of putting these mountains on. Dorothy Mills points out that, you know, geography makes a place what it is. We're in the Midwest. It's flat. We have excellent farming ground. So what are we? We have some big cities, but we're a rural place, right? The Midwest is full of farms, lots of small towns. We are primarily rural, although that's, you know, shifting. My family is a farming family in Southern Illinois for generations. It affected who we became. So Italy is first of all cut off from the north. Dorothy Mills tells us that it's not so hard to get in. It's really hard to get out. The cliffs on this side of the Alps are really, really steep. Hannibal, who we're going to talk about later, who crossed the Alps with his elephants, famously, and if you don't know the story, you're going to find out, you know, like next month. But he brought an army across the Alps, and he made it through. People are like, oh my gosh, he crossed the Alps with elephants. Well, armies cross the Alps, not with elephants. But when they got to this side, it was terrible because it was just sheer cliff straight down. They lost elephants, they lost horses, they lost people. It was ugly. They got some of the elephants in though, which was cool. So there wasn't a lot of travel. Once you were in Italy, you didn't really go back. All right.
Except
so
for the books.
they're isolated. Tribes come down and they settle in Italy. Some of the most important being the Etruscans in Etruria here, and they just stayed. The other thing is these mountains. Why do people like to settle near water, do you think? Why is it a good idea?
Because it's easier to transport goods over water than over land.
It is. It is. And water sources, although you can't drink salt water, I realize, but water for other purposes. So,
like plants, farming.
Yes, irrigation, exactly. So a lot of the settlements, do you see how the towns, these aren't all the towns in Italy, obviously, but do you see how many important towns seem to be on the coast?
Rome's not.
Rome is not, but it's very close, and it has a river.
Mhm.
It has a river, which was its key. Because you know what, if you're on the coast, something else, pirate guys can just come and plunder you. If it's easy to transport stuff, it's also easy for people to find you and just come and take your stuff. Like Pirates of the Caribbean at the beginning when they, maybe. Not with the cannons though. So they're settling on the coast. They're settling often on this coast, and it makes Italy kind of face this direction. You know, Dorothy Mills talked about that. Let me see if there's anything else. Why don't you label Sicily while you've got it out, so we don't forget that this is Sicily. Oh, and you know what? I want to see what you're. Oh yeah. Did we already label Carthage?
No, I mean, I just
Oh, you
started
did.
labeling.
You did. Go while we've got it out, because this is going to be real important. Go to Sicily. Go across. And you see how Africa sticks out? I don't know if your map is detailed enough to have this little peninsula here. Put on Carthage. I will spell Carthage for you in the back. Carthage is going to be important, so let's put it on our maps. Okay, so I'm going to take. No, I do want the other. Okay, it doesn't matter. We're not going to move it yet. Here's Greece, right? The land comes down here, and Greece is right here. Italy was facing this direction. Greece was facing this direction. That kind of juts out that direction. And so Greek culture, Alexander the Great, spread over here where I am, right? Italy was facing west. They were going to be in command of the Western Mediterranean, was their concern, primarily. And mountains kind of led them in that direction. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. I mentioned the Etruscans living here. The other group of people, before I take our map away, the Greeks. There were Greek people living in Italy. Do you remember way back in September, maybe, we talked about early Greece.
Got way too big, and they had to send people over to Rome.
Yes, they sent colonies out. Many of their colonies went to what's now Turkey. Right? Remember, those are the people that rebelled against the king of Persia. The king of Persia got all upset. But they also sent people to Sicily and to southern Italy. So if you ever wonder, how did those Romans get all these Greek gods, and why are they always copying Greek statues? It's because they had very early contact with Greek people. Make sense? So let me see if there's anything else in there I wanted to. Let's go through that first question. I guess we already covered it. Oh, we already did the first two questions, actually. How did exposure to danger affect the character of the developing Roman people? Danger from Latians and Samniums and Umbriums and all of these tribes. In fact, this is a good time, actually, to. No, they're not on there. Never mind.
Did you want to change your maps back? To have the other ones back?
No. We're not switching them again. It says the danger of attack from enemies had a marked influence on the character of the people who lived in Italy, especially on the early Romans, who were destined to become the rulers of the land. Constantly exposed to danger, from the earliest days they experienced the sternness and seriousness of life. Self-defense forced them to unite, and often their very existence depended on the life of the strictest self-discipline and control. All this made them stern, practical, and capable. So remember we talked earlier about that difference between like the way the Greeks were, their love, the things they loved, and the way the Romans were practical. If you have people surrounding you going to attack you and kill you all the time, you get very practical. You get very stern.
We need this now.
We need this and we need this now, or we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Yes. And we already did the second question. I'm sorry. What two groups of people left an abiding mark The Etruscans and the Greeks was what I was looking for.
I thought.
It's okay.
I thought the Latins, like the Latins were.
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
They were
Well,
the last.
Yeah.
that's why I put a biting mark in quotation marks, because that's the word that she used, a biting. They left in a biting mark. It's okay. You know what? It's true. But the Latins were people they conquered instead of.
I mean,
they conquered and assimilated. So, you know what? I don't mark your answers really wrong anyway, so.
Isn't that where they
okay.
got Latin from? The Romans?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, but the Etruscan, well, no, it was the Latins. You're right, okay. Ethan's right. Latins is good, but I think Dorothy Mills said the Etruscans and the Greeks left a biting mark. I'll have to change that question for the next group of people. Okay, so now let's get into the heart of the story. The founding of Rome. Now, is this story true? I don't know. There's nothing really in it that couldn't be true. I mean, animals take care of children. Are there other stories where, like, not Tarzan, but you know, not the Jungle Book? Yeah.
So baby animals or people, babies, give off a scent that other animals can pick up, and it causes them to want to care for them, or at least not eat them.
That's
It's
very
kind of
interesting.
It's kind of.
Oh yeah, the she-wolf.
It's kind of rural. It's
It's a good
kind of
story.
babies, newborn, like that. That's their That's their defense.
Because, well, this is not very nice to say, because baby human beings can sometimes be a little annoying. Do you know what I mean? Like they cry and they wake you up, but you want, I mean, if you're a normal human being, you want to take care of them, even though. That's interesting. I did not know that. There's a children's book called The Bear That Heard Crying that I used to read to my kids. And it's based on a true story. Do you guys know about this? A 3-year-old got lost in the woods. This is in colonial New England. And they looked for several days for this child, and they couldn't find her. And finally, they found her, and she was tired and hungry and dirty, but okay. And she said a big dog had taken care of her, and there were bear tracks all around her. Apparently a bear had come at night and kept her warm in the woods. And the writer of this children's book, it was an ancestor of hers, like a great-great-grandmother, great, I don't know how many greats. And so I'd read this book over and over to my kids, and then a couple of years ago I saw in the news, there was some story similar, and it happened recently. Like some kid was lost in the woods, and they claimed, and people were saying, oh, that's the stupidest thing. Like, who would believe a child? That would never happen. And I thought, have you not read The Bear That Heard Crying? Anyway, maybe it was something similar like that. So, would a wolf take care of baby children? I don't know.
Or eat them.
But let's go back further than that. Who was the guy who came to Italy and started the whole ball rolling?
Technically, it was 2 guys. It was Romulus and Remus.
Way before them.
Oh, whoa.
Great.
My bad.
Okay, no, that's okay.
Aeneas, the Trojan.
Aeneas.
Oh.
He is an escapee from burning Troy. And
Totally
unfortunately, for
skipped
time
over that.
constraints,
Oops.
maybe next time I teach this class we'll read this, but I wanted to read a retelling of the Aeneid. There's a famous Latin author named Virgil.
Yes, we already talked about that.
Oh, you talked about Virgil? Well, no, that's Homer. This is the Aeneid.
Oh.
And he wrote an epic of the founding of the Roman people coming from Troy. I find it interesting. Remind me again, who won the Trojan War? The Greeks won the Trojan War. The Trojans are the losers. But the Romans traced themselves back to Troy. There's something, I was reading an author once, and they said, you know, people still name children Hector. They don't name children Achilles very often. Like we have sympathy with the losing side. Maybe it's because of the Romans, I don't know, instead of the winning side. Like, I don't know. But the Romans traced themselves back to Aeneas, whose mother was Aphrodite. Okay, I don't really believe that. We're talking about whether this could be true. I don't really believe that part. The beginning of the Aeneid tells us how the night that the guys jumped out of the horse, Aeneas went out and he was going to fight for his country, and then it was just, there were Greeks everywhere. He ran back to check on his wife and son, and then he ran back out to try to fight again. And Virgil says he went out, and not only did he see the battle, but he saw the gods fighting. Like the gods were ripping down the walls of Troy because, you know, those goddesses didn't get that apple. Really makes you angry. Oh, okay, I'm going to digress. So I have a crazy son who gets me weird stuff for Christmas, some of which I'm going to show you. This was from former Christmases. And this year he got me a 3-foot-tall statue of Venus, the Venus of Arles. She's indoor, outdoor. She can go where hard. Anyway, and so it's a Roman copy of a Greek original by Praxiteles. And she's in my library currently. And she's holding something that is broken. Apparently it used to be a mirror. Because she's Aphrodite and she likes to check herself out. And in her other hand, she's holding a ball. And so my son and I were discussing. So we were looking it up, you know, history of this statue. It's the apple.
Oh.
She's holding the apple and she's checking herself out because she's the fairest. It's very shallow.
Wait, how come the mirror's broken?
Because the
Old.
original, from wear and tear. Because it's thousands of years old, and they dug it up somewhere, and it was already broken.
But they copied it, right? That's not the original.
They copied it.
No, but yes. And so we don't, the Romans may have put a mirror in her hand, but that wasn't originally what she was holding, because when the Romans copied it, we don't know if their original was intact that they copied it from anyway. I'm sorry. That was a long digression. Anyway, it reminded me that the gods and goddesses are angry with Troy, some of them. They're fighting and they're ripping down Troy. And Aphrodite, his mom, comes and says, Aeneas, skedaddle. She did not say skedaddle.
Kind of like Paris.
Yes. Well,
Like, didn't she skedaddle Paris?
oh, from when he stole Helen?
No, like in the battle.
Oh yeah. She didn't whisk him away magically. He had to do it. It would have been nice if she whisked him away. This one he had to do under his own power. But he had people to take care of. So he goes back to get his family, and famously, you will see this in pictures if you read the Aeneid when you were older, the famous picture of Aeneas. He's holding his old elderly father, Ascanius, on his back.
Oh yeah.
And he's leading his little son by the hand. All right. I why is that important? Well, Aeneas is carrying the whole future. He's carrying the past on his back, and he's leading the future by the hand. He's bringing everything that he had in Troy away with him, because he's been earmarked by the gods for a special task. He's going to rebuild a new civilization somewhere else. That's his job. So he heads out, and unfortunately his wife gets lost in the shuffle. And he goes back to find her, and her spirit appears to him and says, I'm dead, just leave. It's a little more dramatic than that. Basically, she says, I'm dead, you need to leave. So he gathers outside of burning Troy with a few other fugitives, and they set out to figure out where in the world this place is they're supposed to go, because they don't know. They try various places, and it just doesn't work out. They try Carthage, and they stay there a good long time. In fact, he falls in love with the queen in Carthage. This was not a good thing. Dido is her name. And, but eventually, the gods come to him and say, Aeneas, this is someone else's city. You're going to build a new city. You've got a destiny. You can't just stay here living with Dido and living in her palace. You need your own, to fulfill your own destiny. So he leaves. She's very unhappy. She burns herself down in her whole palace. She's very, very vindictive. And so they end up in Latium. There are people, the Latins, already living there with a king named Latinus. How convenient that he's the king of the Latins and his name is Latinus. And he has a daughter named Lavinia. And he has had a prophecy. Lavinia is supposed to be married to some foreigner. And with this foreigner, they will found a new people.
Oh wow.
Okay? So he's on the look kind of for a foreigner. All
I
right?
don't know how.
No, he's just looking for any foreigner. However, there's a guy that already lives there. His name is Turnus, and he's like Gaston, you know? He's just everything. He's got it all. And he thinks, whether or not it was ever formalized, he thinks he's engaged to Lavinia. Like, it's just so obvious. It's like Gaston, you know? It's like, who wouldn't want to marry me? That's the image I get. And this foreigner comes, and Latina says, it's the foreigner. Well, she has to marry the foreigner. Turnus is not happy. Goddesses get involved, nasty goddesses that stir people up to anger, big battles. Aeneas wins. Let's go straight to the end.
Nice.
Marries Lavinia, and they found a new
Can
people.
ancient people do anything in history without killing each other?
No.
No, it's all conquering, killing each other. That's
No, that's
and
part
they
of
were
the
in
deal.
Just talk it out.
Latinum. So come on, Latin. Come
Okay,
on.
yeah,
So
I gave it to you
About-
already. I
about-
gave it to you.
death. Latin is death. Okay.
They founded a town called Alba Longa. Long and white. I think it was from the white. Well, I won't go there. There were white sows, a white pig that they were looking for, and that was
How
there.
does
they're
that
going to
work?
found thing.
It's two adjectives.
I
How does
know.
that work?
Well, they're substantive adjectives. We'll talk about it later.
Oh.
Okay.
You said look what
What?
You said look what you
They founded a town. Okay, so fast forward. Town is getting bigger, and eventually there's a king named, I can't remember his name, but I remember his brother is Numitor. And the king has two sons. No, has a daughter, I'm sorry. Rhea Silvia.
Isn't she the
He-
princess?
Yes. So he's the king. His brother, Numitor, takes over. Boots the king out.
Nice.
Takes his niece. Because, you know, if his niece has kids, they would be heirs to the throne, and he wants to wipe that out. So he shuts her up in a tower, but it doesn't stop Mars from visiting her, and she ends up with two sons. I'm sorry, this is the story. Romulus and Remus.
Oh.
Numitor, very, very, very upset when he finds out Rhea Silvia is about to have children. And what do we do in the ancient world with children we don't want?
Throw them in the river.
Throw them out.
Yeah.
We throw them out, right? We expose them. Which I'm reading through one of the church fathers. He's writing about the year 300, and he was still talking about the fact that early Christians were known for burying the dead, people who were too poor to or had no family, and raising foundling children. They would go out and adopt children nobody wanted and raise them. And these were acts of kindness and mercy that set Christians apart from the rest of the ancient world. Because there was an emperor who tried to go back to heathenism, to paganism. And he said, these Christians don't only take care of their own, they take care of ours too. They make us look bad. So back then, throw the children out. And unfortunately, for Numitor, the Tiber, this is a good time. Can I do it? Finesse it.
You got it.
All right, here we go.
Good job.
The Tiber, which is the river, I told you, Kyle, it goes to the Mediterranean Sea. It's navigable. Was flooding. But it was on the far side of the flooding. We know all about flooding by the Mississippi, right? And it was going down. And so they just kind of tossed him there near the edge of the water and thought it would carry him away, but it didn't. The water went down, and they are rescued by a wolf. A wolf. In your book, there's a picture, a statue of a wolf. This famous, not very attractive statue, in my opinion. They say it's Etruscan. It's an Etruscan statue. So I was looking at this statue all my life, which is a considerable long time, right? And
What page?
it was this is on page 2. No, 22. That was footnote 2. 22. I just found out a couple of years ago that the children were Renaissance additions. It was just a wolf. They just assumed it was the wolf because that's why the Romans would have a statue of a wolf, because of the famous story. And in the Renaissance, they decided it would look better if they put kids underneath. I don't know. I think I'd like it better without the kids, but I thought the kids were ancient. The kids are relatively modern, Renaissance. So the wolf takes care of them for a while, but eventually, who always finds these kids? Shepherds. All right. So they're out in the countryside. A shepherd named Faustulus finds the kids. He, you know, maybe if they visited us, they would say, "What's up with their names?" Maybe they wouldn't like our names.
Their names aren't long enough. They need at least 3 more syllables.
We need all our names. All the men have to end with us, and the women have to end with A. Ella is okay. Some of us aren't. He takes the children in. Through some means, he knows who they are. He knows they are the grandchildren of the true king, and he raises them. Fast forward, they grow up. I'm Emilianus. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. They throw out their uncle Numitor. They reinstate their grandpa, and they go out to found their own new town.
Yeah, and then Romulus kills his brother, obviously, you know? Has to kill his brother.
What can I say about a city that starts out with one brother killing the other? The story goes like this. They are going to decide who's going to be in charge, who's going to be picking the place, and who gets to name the city. 2 things happen. 1, Romulus and Remus are looking for omens. The Etruscans, this is one thing they get from the Etruscans, gave to the Romans this idea that we look at birds to look for signs of the future. All right? Augury, I think augurs usually is birds, but so augurs or augury, all right, is looking for birds or the weird. We cut open an animal and look at its liver or whatever for signs of whether it's a good omen or a bad omen.
Wait, what?
I don't know.
I
I don't know. If there's something wrong, like there'll be stories where, and they sacrificed the victim and it had no stomach.
Oh.
Okay. I don't know how that victim lasted so long without a stomach. So Romulus and Remus are looking for signs. Remus sees 6 eagles first.
Oh my goodness.
Romulus sees 12 eagles second. And then they do the brother thing. I saw him first. Well, I saw more. Yeah, Lauren.
I don't think dodo birds have a digestive system because they have to eat rocks to crush up the berries.
Don't a lot of birds have to do that?
Thanks.
Chickens, you have to give chickens grit
Yeah.
in their diet.
Why are we talking about extinct? Why are we talking about extinct birds?
Our parakeets, sometimes,
Okay.
like, you can buy this stuff from Tesco's that's kind of, it's like really thin gravel stuff.
Oh, yes, yes.
And, I mean, they don't eat it, but they're like,
You try to force it in them anyway, right?
It can't start with dodos and we do chickens, now it's with parakeets.
It's okay. You know what? Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. God is truth and God is one, and so everything is connected. However, for time's sake, sometimes we do have to cut the bird talk short and go back.
Yeah.
But
No
so,
pun intended.
So they do the fight. I saw more. Well, I saw him first. Okay, that's one part. And not that any of you would ever argue with your siblings, but maybe you can identify with the concept that somebody might argue with their siblings. Then Romulus is building a wall. Apparently they both start their own walls in separate places. Romulus is building his wall, and Remus, who can't leave it alone, comes over and says, "Ha! That's some wall. That's really going to keep people out." And he jumps over the wall, and Romulus kills him.
Oh.
I'm not saying it was justified. I'm just saying maybe Remus should have just got some distance. And he says, thus shall it be to all who breach my walls. And Romulus becomes the first king of Rome. It doesn't seem like a good beginning to me. And the reading that I'm going to have you do for this coming week, it gets even worse.
Wow.
I'm going to say that. I'm not even going to tell you because I want you to find out for yourselves. Rome is famous for being, before we move on to Josephus, Rome is famous for being the city of 7 hills. What is handy about having tall hills where you live?
It's hard for the enemy to fight uphill,
Yes.
and you'll be able to see them from farther because you're higher.
Yes. It is a good, it's a good place of defense. Yeah, Ella.
Sledding.
And sledding.
Yes.
I don't know how often it snows in Rome. Do you guys, does it,
Just
does
like
it
it
snow?
didn't snow in Rome.
Well, it snows in the mountain, but that's, I don't know. That's your homework.
No.
Somebody come and tell us if it snows in Rome. So,
Wait.
of course, I have a poem about the 7 hills of Rome.
Yay.
Because why
Nice.
would I not have a poem? On this map, now this is as
Does
Rome
snow
is
in
getting
Rome.
bigger. Look, these purple, Aventine, Celian, Palatine, Capitoline, Esquiline, Viminal, Quirinal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Snow in Rome is rare.
4, 5, 6. No, that was 6. That was 7.
Does it actually snow?
3, 4, 5, 6.
It
Um,
does?
Snow in Rome is rare.
Oh.
It last really fell here in 2012. It last snowed in Rome in
That's what it's
2012.
snowed in 8 years. Of course, we don't know what the climate was like 2,000 years ago, so I'm sorry, Ella. Not gonna be a whole lot of sledding. Although the Romans, being very practical, they built so many other things, I think they should build a snowmaking machine. They could bring in water,
And then
or
use
could they bring in snow?
But that'd be ice, not
It would be. Okay.
not snow.
So here's my idea for this semester. Because the 7 hills of Rome are so very famous, and because it's always good to learn things, and who doesn't like to learn things, I'm going to read this poem every week, and I think I'm going to type it up and give it to all of you, and you can just say it in your leisure hours. And by the end of the semester, we'll all know the 7 hills of Rome.
How long is this thing?
It's easy. Listen to it. Rome was built on 7 hills. Each hill had a name. See if you can learn them. Pretend that it's a game. The Viminal, the Aventine, the Quirinal, the Esquiline. To these please add the Palatine, the Celian, the Capitoline. Rome was built on 7 hills, and there begins the story of the famous Roman Empire and its eternal glory. Wouldn't you like to know that poem? You would.
Right? That's a good idea.
No,
I
sounds
think
terrible.
deep down you would.
I thought
You may not know it. Okay, one more poem on Rome before I give you your assignment and we move on to Josephus and our writing. Remus and this is kind of a lame poem, I'm sorry. It's a little bit juvenile, but.
Honey, oh god.
Remus and Romulus, where have you been? Out in the forest, a wolf took us in. She fed us and nursed us just like her own, then gave us to shepherds until we were grown. Remus and Romulus, what will you be? The founders of Rome, 753 BC. Which is the last thing we're going to do for Rome today. Get your timelines out.
Yes.
Also with mine.
the one time I don't bring.
Timeline.
The one time I
That's
actually.
all right.
I'm
You
just
can
joking.
ask me. I want the page that is 1000 BC at the top and 500 BC at the bottom. It should have things on it already. Tell me something that's already on your timeline. The first Olympics in 776.
And Lycurgus gives Sparta law.
Lycurgus giving laws to Sparta. I would like you to add, this will be roughly halfway, just slightly below your first Olympics, 753, founding of Rome. This is the traditional date of the founding of Rome. And so for the Romans, this was their year 1. They counted time in years from this. And also often noting who was in charge, who were the consuls or who was king at the time. 753 BC. if you don't learn very many dates, 753 BC is a good one to learn. All right. Moving on to Josephus. So what do you think of this book?
Yeah, it's a good history book.
It's decent.
It's decent.
There's a lot of killing. Maybe we should talk about that a little bit.
There was a lot of killing.
Talk about death.
Terrible.
More death. I wondered, I don't know if I asked you guys this question before we talked about this. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. But when I was growing up and going to Sunday school, I feel like a lot of times I learned a lot of Bible stories, but I did not learn them in any context. And so, you'd go and you'd have a lesson on Joseph, or you'd have a lesson on Daniel, or the 3 friends in the fiery furnace. But I didn't really understand the whole plot line of the Old Testament. Do you understand what I mean by that? And so sometimes I was like, well, what are they doing there? I'd read an episode, well, why are they in Babylon? What happened here? I thought they were Israelites. And so, my question for you is, how many of you feel like you really have a good handle on the entire plot of the Old Testament?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, good. So for you guys, this is really very review. And I want to remind you, that's not what this entire book is. For 2 more weeks, you're going to be reading about stuff you basically know. And then after that, you're going to get into stuff you don't know from the Bible, all right? We're going to get into the 400 years, after the Old Testament end.
The 400-year war?
Wow, really? No, the 400 years of silence.
Yeah, the 400 years of silence, that's what I mean. And so find out about the Maccabean revolt and the successors of Alexander the Great that ruled that area, okay? So if this is just review for you, hey, review is always good. But if it's not, if you feel like your knowledge of the Old Testament is kind of spotty and piecey and you're not sure how it all fits together, this is a good opportunity for us to go through the whole flow of the Old Testament. Josephus does not start in Genesis. Notice, he starts with Abraham. Why would he start with Abraham? Yeah, Ethan.
Abraham was basically the founding father of Israel, basically.
Yes, and Josephus, the name, excuse me, the name of this book is the Antiquities of the Jews, the first part of this book. In other words, the ancient history of the Jewish people. For a Roman audience, I want to introduce you to who we are as a people, and the stuff that happened before Abraham really wasn't important for that purpose of his. Where was Abraham from? He went to Canaan. Canaan was the land that God told him to go to.
Yeah.
That's like a guess.
Where in the world is
No clue.
It's called because when somebody says, where is it? You say, No, that's not true. Is all the way over here.
Past Babylon.
Yes. Is down here. It is in Mesopotamia, in the Babylonian Empire. Except the Babylonian Empire that we think of is later. But that's the area. Now, do you still have your maps out? Or those are do you have a map of the entire Mediterranean world?
Wait.
Right? One that's yes,
Rome?
the one that says ancient Rome. Okay. So I'm going to hold up Ethan's as a. Okay. So I'm holding his up. Does everybody have your ancient Rome map? Or if you have your maps with you, you have it. Okay? So compare your map with here. You see the Black Sea, you see Egypt, and the Red Sea down here. Go over here, and at the very corner of your map, you see this sticking up. Do you see right here? There's water. Does everybody see?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there are 2 rivers. It's very faint on your map. That are flowing down. It looks like they stop before they get there because they flow together. I would like you to trace your pencil over those, would you, and make them darker?
I can't see.
Okay, so here's your map. Over in the lower right-hand corner, do you see there's a little bit of water jetting in? The Persian Gulf? Do you see very faint lines? 2 of them. And they're both flowing towards that water. I would like you to take your pencil and trace over them to make them dark. Here, I'm gonna come back and just kind of survey if anybody's not sure what they're doing. Yeah. Kind of? Yes, that's exactly. I want to pay close attention to those. If I had all the time in the world, we'd study Egypt and Babylon and all these things, but we don't.
See that you brought an Egyptian.
I did, because we're going to talk about Egypt in a little bit. Those 2 rivers are very, very important in the ancient world, and so it's good for us to be acquainted with their names, which you've probably heard, and where they are. The one on the bottom, the one on this side, you see what I mean, is called the Euphrates.
Oh yeah, the Euphrates and Tigris River.
Yes, that's what it is.
That's not, it's most one. Looking at that.
The one on the upper, or the other side, is the Tigris. Yeah. Oh, no, you were just getting ready to, thought that was a question.
And they form the.
You know? That's the next thing I'm going to talk about. When people traveled in the ancient world, well, first of all, let me ask you, what's here? I know it says Arabia, but what's it like?
Desert.
It's just desert. You do not want to go from here to here across the desert. You will die. I mean, maybe people made it, but for the most part, it wasn't a good idea.
I mean, the Bedouins made it.
Wait a minute.
Yes, Bedouins lived for their entire lives out there. But travelers going back and forth did not cut across. It was hazardous. So they had a habit of traveling. Say I'm in Egypt and I want to go to Babylon. I could go the short way, but that's a very dangerous way. So I would come up through here. I'm along the coast. I have water. I have food. I come up here to where these rivers are, and then I turn and I follow the rivers, because then I'm always near water. And do you see that if you do that, the shape, okay, that, you don't have to write this down, but you will hear about this. It's called the Fertile Crescent. Sometimes you'll hear about the Fertile Crescent. You'll say, what in the world? Is that like crescent rolls? What? No. It's the area that grew food because it had water. Unlike all this, which was a desert wasteland. So people got in the habit of traveling. So why do I bring this up? Abraham is living in Ur. Ur. Why don't you put Ur on your map while we got the map out? I don't know exactly where to put it. Put it sort of between the 2 rivers here, close to where they come together. Ur. You are. And God calls to Abraham. Why Abraham? I don't know. Because God gets to do as he pleases, right? And he chose Abraham. And he said, Abraham, I want you to go to a land, you don't know where it is, you're not going to own it, but I want you to go live there. And it tells us a lot about who Abraham was even then, that he went. He packed up everything he had, and he went. But he didn't cut across. He traveled up the river. And he got up here, and his, it's terrible, I can't remember, it's his father, his uncle, there's Nahor and Taran. They stay a while, and the elderly relative dies there. And God speaks to Abraham again, and he says, you're not there yet. Go to the place I've promised you. So he's come up here, and now he comes down the other side of the crescent, and he ends up in what was then known as Canaan. And the people living there were Canaanites, right? But they weren't just one group of people, there were all sorts of people living there. It's useless later. So I'm not going to painstakingly go through the entire story of that you read because you know most of it. But Abraham ends up at one point in Egypt, right? Later, his descendants, Joseph and Joseph's brothers and their dad Jacob, also end up in Egypt through circumstances that I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with, involving selling your brother, which just don't do that. And so this is an opportunity for us to talk a little bit about Egypt. When Abraham went to Egypt, the pyramids were already old. They were there. Now, Dorothy, oh no, it wouldn't have been Dorothy Mills, it would have been Josephus. I feel like in his account it says something about making the Israelite slaves build the pyramids.
Yeah, it does.
No, I'm sorry, Josephus, you were mistaken. Although he didn't know he was mistaken. So I would like you also, get your timelines out again, but this time I want the one that's 2000 to 1000.
Uh-oh.
Do we have one of those?
Mm-hmm.
And it was 2000 to 1000, right?
Yes.
I didn't think I'd put to 1500 because I didn't think we were going to put much on here. Right around 2000, I want you to put Abraham.
Wait, what?
So do you have a timeline where 2000 BC is at the top?
We never had one.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
making one.
we
right
do.
now.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, some people do and some people don't.
Yeah, we have
Yes,
one.
no. Okay, the timeline fairy came and
I don't-
took yours.
What year?
Wait, no, we,
Just as close to 2000 as you can, like roughly 2000. That is the time of Abraham.
So what
Oh,
date do we
2000. I
label
wrote
it?
200.
What?
What date do we label it?
It's 2000 BC.
Why that number was wrong.
This is rough. We don't know for certain. Like, I don't know that Abraham's birthday was April 21st in, 2002 BC. We don't know, all right? But roughly, this is the timing. And I just want to work some of these people in so that you can see. And, while we've got the page out, we're just going to skip ahead. And down here at 1000, I want you to put David. All right?
where was the other map?
What?
The other 1000 BC map. 1500.
Well, not anything today, because we're not getting that far yet.
Yeah.
But we will. Because you'll be reading about David
This
this
goes
next
from
week.
2000 to 1000. That goes from like
Oh,
1000
one more
or
thing.
999 BC.
Guys,
to 500.
In your Josephus book, towards the beginning, there's a a list of dates. I don't know if you noticed that. And they're not really the most widely accepted dates anymore for things. So I'm going to give you my dates, all right? And if you look in the Josephus book at the timeline, you might say, hey, Mrs. Ferguson said this. We don't have, this is sort of conjecture, but my dates are based on going back through the years, the reigns of the kings of Israel and Judah, back through David. And so I would like, we're going to add two more things here. 1450, the Exodus. And did we already put the Trojan War on our map, our
Yeah.
timelines? 1250?
No.
What, 1200?
I believe
We did? We
Let me
did.
look
Some
at
people.
Let me look at my phone.
Well, we're going to add it. 1250, Trojan War.
Oh, we didn't add it?
I don't know.
It's Peloponnesian War. I don't know if Sal missed that on the marathon. We didn't add it? I thought we did.
So think about this. What's happening, as far as we know, when Troy got attacked, under what circumstances we don't know, The Israelites are living in the promised land, and they have judges. It's time of the judges. Can I put it together? Okay, and you can put those, that's the end to the sort of not very exciting adding things to maps and timelines that we're going to do today. So they end up in Egypt, and I did bring, as Alex said, I brought some Egyptian things. Egypt is interesting, and we don't have time to talk about it. I know, which is a bummer.
Did you get it from your word
Yes,
son?
these were all from my weird son, who gave me the reading session. This was in the last 2 years. So I'm going to leave them over here, and if you want to come over and take a look after class, briefly, be my guest. Just be careful with them, but I don't care if you touch them. This is, well, does anybody know what this is?
Is that a compact jar?
Canopic jar. These are, they had a series of jars like this. I think they have some real ones at the museum down in the Egyptian exhibit. And they, when you turn someone into a mummy, you take out some of their organs, and you put them in special jars. This is the intestine jar.
Oh,
Nice.
It does not have intestines.
That's good.
It has little cards telling me about it. But this is the intestine jar, and
How can you tell
why
the
I
difference?
have one, I just can't tell you. But I do.
How can you tell the difference between an intestine and another?
They have different gods
Oh.
on the top.
Little bird.
This is a falcon-headed god whose name is
Horus?
almost unpronounceable, and
What?
no, this was the card says inside. This is Hathor. She was this cow, like ox horns or bull horns. This is the Hathor.
Interesting.
And I also, my son decided I would like my own Book of the Dead.
That's nice.
This is a document that they would bury with mummies. The priests used it, and it tells you everything you're supposed to do for the mummy, and everything the mummy is supposed to do in the afterlife. And all the instructions. When they ask you this question, this is the answer. And when you cross this river, this is what you do. And so you can browse through this. It's a lot of text. You can see all the hieroglyphics.
Cool.
And it's just translated at the bottom. This is the whole
Oh,
the whole book is. So if you're interested in Egypt, you can take a look at those. But interestingly, in Egypt, we meet it again. They have a bunch of gods, just like the Greeks. They also know that something happens after we die. They don't think we just disappear. Something happens to people after we die. There were a few Greek philosophers who got on this kick of, no, we're just annihilated when we die. But for the most part, in the ancient world, they retained a knowledge. Something happens after we die. The soul keeps living. And you know what? To give the Egyptians credit, we know the truth. We know we keep living eternally. We get our bodies back, right, at the resurrection. They tried to preserve their own bodies. Do you see what I mean? But it's kind of a grasping after, what would life be like eternally without a body? I don't think I want to live forever without a body. We need bodies. Bodies are important. We entrust our bodies to God to bring them back in His time. They saved them by mummifying. Do you see kind of the relation? That all these ancient people, they're grasping. They're trying to figure out what's true, but they can't quite get it. Because we can't get it all on our own. We have to have God reveal Himself to us. So, these are the sorts of things that Abraham first of all, and then Joseph later, and his brothers, and then the Israelites for 400 years in slavery would have seen. Let's talk about the plagues for just a minute. Can anybody just name, let's stop that. It was kind of bothering me anyway. Name a plague, Ella.
Bubonic plague.
Oh, no, I meant the plagues of Egypt. But that is a plague. I don't know that they got although they did break out in, name a plague that God poured out on the Egyptians.
Yeah, that's not
fly stuff.
Flies,
No.
frogs,
Darkness.
Fleas,
darkness,
flies,
blood,
Red
hail, death. Okay, awesome. Here's, and maybe you've heard this before. The Egyptians had a god of the Nile.
Oh, yeah.
The Egyptians had Ra, the sun god. The Egyptians had a frog-headed god. The Egyptian had a fly god.
A
The
fly
Egyptians
god?
had, yes, oh, crazy. People who worship cats, come on. They have everything,
Sure.
right? God didn't just think of creative ways to be mean to the Egyptians. God poured out judgment on their gods. Your sun god, darkness. The Nile god, turn it to blood. That frog-headed god, I'm in charge of the frogs. God poured out judgment. And then when pharaohs died, they became gods. Pharaoh Jr. is the next god. Pharaoh Jr. died, along with the firstborn in every household. Does that make sense? It's not, because you read it and it's sort of this random, whoa, that would be nasty. I don't know. You know what, I have a chart that gives you the names of the Egyptian gods. I will, do I have somewhere to write? Here. Can I just borrow? Okay. If I don't write it down, I won't remember. Charts of plagues and gods. I better put Egypt. Once I wrote myself a note and I went back later, I had no idea what it meant.
That was invented cementing all of the Egyptian.
And God set them free. What do the Jews, what did the Hebrews call that event when the firstborn in every Egyptian household died? Passover, because the angel of death passed over them. And what did you have to do to get the angel of death to pass over?
Clean the
Blood on
You
your
have
door.
to kill a lamb or
kill the cleanest lamb.
kill a sheep or
Yeah, it was a lamb. It was a lamb.
Kill it and then paint its blood on your door.
Paint its blood. It had to be perfect. And it said, don't break any of its bones. Take it says hyssop. Apparently it's a branch that's fluffy and you can use it like a paintbrush.
Fluffy.
And where did they put the blood?
On the doorway, not the door.
Okay.
Or
Any
the
particular
arch.
place?
The top.
They put it on the top, here, and here. Here, here, and here. Any connection? Like does this
Across.
What? That's
I know.
mind blowing.
And when he saw the blood, he passed over the house, the angel of death. Later on, we hear that Jesus on the cross at Passover, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, you probably heard this, when people were crucified, they died slowly and miserably. They suffocated. They couldn't lift themselves up to get a breath. You had no platform from which to rise up, and they tended to die very slowly. Jesus died relatively quickly. But what they would do, because the next day was a holy day, it was the Jewish Sabbath, they would go around, this is very ugly, but the Roman soldiers would just break their legs so that they could not lift up and get a breath. Okay? And they came to Jesus, and he was already dead. Not a bone of his was broken. I know. It kind of gives me goosebumps.
But they did stab his
all
side.
is connected.
Prove.
Yes, they stabbed him in the side. Okay? But they did not break any bones. Passover. The Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world. The Israelites left, went back to, I guess we can get everything done. Back to Canaan, but Here, this is a close-up. We have Egypt and the Nile and the Sinai Peninsula. I just kind of wanted to give you a close-up. We're not going to put this on your maps or anything, but the Israelites went up and they parked, so to speak, on this side of the Jordan River. Why did they not just go right in?
There were giants living in there?
Yeah, because they sent spies in. Do you remember this?
Mm.
Oh, boo-hoo, we can't go in. They're so big. Never mind that we just saw God wipe out an entire army in the Red Sea and pour out plagues on people. Oh, we're so scared. Except for Joshua and Caleb. Like, no, we can do this. We can do this.
And those are the only two to make it up.
Yeah, they said, Moses, you just brought us out here to die in the desert. Shame on you. You were slaves. Get over it. And so God said, you know what? You think you're all going to die in the desert? Boom. Wish granted. Y'all get to die in the desert, except for Joshua and Caleb, who believed.
Bye, guys.
Yes. Which is kind of where we brought up your reading for this week, up to going back into the, is that correct? Is it kind of where we read up to? They're getting ready to go in, kind of up to Joshua. So they spent 40 years wandering in this lovely deserty place known as the Sinai Peninsula. We don't know that the Mount Sinai, where Moses received the Ten Commandments, there is a mountain there, and it's referred to as Mount Sinai. There's actually a very ancient monastery, St. Catherine's Monastery, at the base of the mountain. But the truth is, we don't know exactly where it was. This is what tradition tells us where it was, and we should never poo-poo tradition. People hand down important things because they're important, but for a reason. Sometimes things get altered, but often the truth gets passed down. Yeah, Alex.
I watched a document from like 2008 or something, and these two people were looking for Mount Sinai, and they had some real evidence that they thought they found where the ground had literally risen up right below the surface of the Red Sea, and that's where
Really?
they thought that the Israelites had passed. They found the tomb of Moses, and that's even what the native Bedouins referred to it. So even the Bedouins knew.
Except what
Yeah.
might be a problem with finding the tomb of Moses? Does anybody know? Alice? They didn't, because Moses went up on the mountain to die alone, and it tells us weirdly in the book of Jude, there's a reference to Satan disputing over the body of Moses. I know.
Wait,
Some people, it comes from other sources that aren't part of the Bible, but this is in the Bible, in the book of Jude. And it says, Satan disputed over the body, he wanted the body of Moses. It says God buried him, but Satan came to dispute.
Why did Satan
But
get the body
here's
of
my
Moses?
theory, okay. What would have happened if Satan had possessed Moses' body and Moses had come back down the mountain and told the Israelites to do a bunch of crud against God? And they had listened to him. It's the only interest I can think that. We meet Moses again in the New Testament.
Can Satan do that?
I don't know. I mean, demons possess living people. But it would be really, well, A, creepy, but B, a big problem for the Israelites. Do you know what I mean? If their spiritual leader came back and started telling them to sin. Anyway, so that might be a problem. But that's been a struggle for years for Christians because, scientists say, well, there's no archaeological evidence of 40 years in the desert. But think about it. They were being fed manna. Why did they call it manna, by the way? Do you remember?
Isn't that, I don't know.
Yeah, it means, what is it? They went out and said, what is it? And they just decided to call it, what is it? And they ate, what is it, for 40 years. I think that's funny. But it says that their sandals didn't wear out. I suppose in today's lingo, they left very little carbon footprint behind them. Maybe that's why we don't find it. I don't know. Also, textiles rot. Not so much in the desert, but, you know, clothing and things like that, if they left anything behind. I don't know why we don't find it. I believe it happened. They don't have to find it for me to believe it, but, okay. So, we need to press on, because I haven't even given you your writing thing yet, but your writing will be easy and short. I mean, I don't know if it'll be short in your writing, but it'll be short in the giving. Oh, okay, so for next week, would you please,
More on the Ant and the Grasshopper?
well, just a second, read Mills, chapters 4 and 5. Now, this is kind of a longish chapter, pages 26 through 63. But there just was really no good place to break it up. It's the 7 kings of Rome. Rome started out with kings. The first one you've already met, Romulus, who started his career by killing his brother. Yeah. In Josephus, I would like you to read chapters 21 through 38, which is roughly the same amount I just had you read. And it should not be a difficult, hopefully.
60 pages.
Yes. I told you that for the next few weeks, your reading was going to be a little heavier, but your writing was going to be a little lighter.
That's nice.
Okay.
It balances out.
I'm going to multitask. I'm going to hand these out to you and describe your new assignment at the same time. So, this week I had you retell a story and incorporating who, what, when, where, why. Trying to, instead of just tell me, there was a man, he was,
Every week. Every week.
Every week what?
I was gonna hand him one and then I pulled it out of that.
That's nice.
This week I would like you to use the same story at the end of the grasshopper, but I would like you, here, there should be one, oh, there's 3 different colors. Okay. Another way to make your writing really pop, in addition to working action in instead of just telling, is to appeal to the senses, right? Taste, touch, smell, hearing, sight. If you hear what the character is experiencing in his senses, it draws you in.
He
Now-
hears the chirping from the grasshopper.
Yes,
over the...
except don't do it like that. Don't say, and he saw the flower, and he heard, you know, a noise, because that's boring. Work it in. Now, some of you went, as they say in Redwall, A and B, the C of D, above and beyond the call of duty. The hares. Is it Redwall people here? Redwall lovers? Sad. Some of you did the whole story. I am not asking for that. If you want to do it, just go for it again. You can rewrite another Ant and the Grasshopper story. You can write the sequel to the Ant and the Grasshopper. The grasshopper gets his friends and comes and attacks the ants.
Oh my
I'm
god.
Takes the food.
I'm pretty sure that was already made into a movie.
I've been hanging out with the ancient people and they're fighting.
I couldn't stop writing. You know?
So here's what we have. I have taken the same story, My Tortoise and the Hare, and I made a little chart for myself. I'm just going to hand you guys some papers. Here, I'm going to give Alex one, and then you guys take and then just pass back.
No.
Okay? No, we don't have time for that.
Sorry.
Okay.
You're terrible.
I did the same thing. I took the story and I chose the same morning.
Oh dear.
I don't know when you've chosen, but I chose the same morning. So you choose the same time period, whenever this happens. And I decided to just focus on the tortoise. Remember, my tortoise woke up on that rock because he was so slow he couldn't get in the night before. And if you want to do one of these, I've got an extra here but I don't know what else you're writing, so I'll talk to you and your mom later. So I focused on him and I pictured him waking up. I decided, what does he see? He sees the grass waving and the trees budding because it was spring. Remember in my former example, it was an early spring morning. What does he hear? A robin singing, because it's spring. What does he feel? A cool breeze. What does he smell? Oh, the new spring flowers. And what does he taste? Taste is a little hard to work into a story because, you know, you got to put it in your mouth. But he tastes the salty rock. Here's what I'm picturing. You know how when you sleep, and sometimes your tongue hangs out and you drool a little bit and your mouth is open? Okay, that's what happened to him. So picture the turtle. This is an interesting picture too, with his head like and his tongue hanging out. So here's my 5 senses paragraph. The first sight that greeted Tommy Tortoise's eyes as he awoke on the day of the big race was a tree at the edge of the forest, energetically sprouting its first leaf buds of the year. In another moment, the waving meadow grass came into focus, and the cool spring breeze swept across head and feet, which were already tingling with excitement. Dotting the meadow, newly blooming, fragrant daffodils and hyacinths wafted their scent towards his nostrils, breathing energy into his usually sluggish body. Slowly he licked his dry lips, tasting the salt from the rock on which he had slept. And I have a typo there, I'm sorry. Although sleep still tried to cling to him tenaciously, he shook it off as a robin's morning song flowed from the meadow. The day had arrived. So I did the best I could to not say, and he heard a robin. And now, I was writing this, and I was just going to say, oh, newly blooming flowers. But remember I told you specific is good. Specific paints a very clear picture. And so I picked spring flowers. 2 daffodils and hyacinths that I happen to know are spring flowers. But do not do research on the vegetation of our area by season unless you really want to. But I just happen to know those bloom in the spring. Yeah, Simeon.
Do you want us to do both the ant and grasshopper?
If you want to. You can do one, you can do both, it's up to you. But yeah, I see that I could have done better because I had at the beginning, he saw a tree at the edge of the forest. I was not specific. This would be better writing if I said he saw a maple waving at the edge of the forest, or an elm. Not an evergreen though, or it wouldn't have buds. Yeah, Kyle.
Do we have to put it with our other paper? Like, is it like, I'm not sure.
You know what?
Just
No,
bring this
it
paragraph in?
it does not have to be connected as mine is. I chose because I'm lazy, and I had already written the other one. I just used the same scenario.
Okay.
If you have a different situation, but don't feel like you have to tell the whole story of the ant and the grasshopper. Remember this: you're painting a picture in time. Because remember, if time goes on, he's going to see and hear and smell and taste different things. But we're focusing on one moment. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mhm.
Okay, then I have kept you a little late, but you may go and have, oh my goodness, have a good week.